You're standing on the shore of Nova Scotia, looking north. It is cold. The water laps the stones at your feet, and the strait is empty. That is, until you see something sailing by. A beautiful ship with white sails, 3 masts, and she is completely engulfed in flames. Awestruck with horror, you watch as the specter from a bygone age silently sails by you in silence and disappears, along with all traces of her. Did you even just see that? You are not crazy. You are now one of many people over 200 years who have seen this exact ship sail by in the way you just did. But what is her story? Why does she just drift by, always in flames? Where does she come from? Where does she go? And why does she seem to be trapped in a loop? This is the story of the ghost ship of the Northumberland Strait. She is not the most widely known ghost ship, but her story is intriguing, the mystery is fascinating, and the theory and lore goes very deep with this one. Perhaps she has a greater purpose to continue to sail long after her time than any of us think. And there are few things that send a chill down my spine more than a ghost ship. So, let's set sail. The exact year that the first part of our story occurred in is not clear. I've seen different years thrown around, and I'm just going to go with one of them that I saw. In 1786, the residents of Prince Edward Island awoke to an eerie sight. Trepidation spread throughout the town. A ship was on the horizon, gliding eerily, lifelessly, toward shore under her own power. No one was on deck. No one was hailing those on shore. And no one was replying to the hails from the islanders. No one knew where she came from, who she was, or where her crew was. The ship came near to shore, and the residents on the island could make out some of the details. She was a schooner, her rigging was in good shape, and her sails were furled. But sails ready to catch the wind, well-maintained rigging, and a nice-looking ship are all pointless if the crew is nowhere to be seen. Residents quickly launched an investigation of the mysterious schooner drifting towards them. Rowing out, their calls still went unanswered, and when they boarded, they found the ship deserted. Now, this is almost a century before the story of the Mary Celeste, so that story didn't have any kind of influence on this legend. The ship was deserted, there was no sign of her crew at all, she was abandoned. She also had no marks, no name, papers, anything that could be found. It's like she was a ghost. She just appeared with no one on board and had no name to be called. She was fully provisioned with food, water, anything her crew would need, so where were they? In another similarity to the Mary Celeste, she also showed no signs of foul play, of any kind of struggle, anything. It was like everyone stopped what they were doing and jumped ship randomly. All indications were that the crew left the ship willingly, leaving behind everything they had. Mutiny, sickness, pirates, paranormal activity were all suggested explanations for why the ship was found in the state it was in. Perhaps pirates had boarded and taken the crew, then abandoned the ship, but there was no sign of violence. This also seems to disprove the mutiny theory. Sickness might have broken out, and the crew abandoned ship to escape or seek medical assistance, but that second one really doesn't make any sense, and there was also no evidence for this. There was no makeshift hospital or quarantine area inside the ship. No trace of who owned the ship or who her crew was were ever found. There were efforts made to track down who it might have been, but there were no papers on board, the ship had no name, and there was just nothing to identify her. So the trail went cold. Yeah, probably, Spino. Ever since this event, over 200 years ago, the ship is still seen to this day, sailing into the strait, just like she did all those years ago, always described as a beautiful schooner, a bright white and gold ship, with white sails which burst into flames as she passes you. According to locals, the ghost ship always comes before a storm and serves as a warning. That is interesting. It almost sounds like the ship is a guardian for the people who found her now. That's kind of cool. I like that idea a lot, that the ship itself now serves as a guardian for those who found her all those years ago. That is strangely wholesome. Fine. Back to the regularly scheduled scary horror mystery I do here. The ghost ship does supposedly come when there is a wind from the northeast, serving as a warning for bad weather to come. Other stories vary somewhat in how the ship is described, but overall the shape is the same. Sometimes witnesses say they can see phantom crew members climbing the masts. Others say the ship doesn't vanish, but instead eventually burns and sinks. One story from 1900 is kind of eerie. Supposedly, some sailors jumped into a rowboat to try and reach the burning ship to save who they could, but they never got any nearer to it, no matter how much they rowed out towards it. And eventually, she just vanished. It's interesting that the original ship could not be traced as well, and that she then seemed to begin haunting the strait. Even today, this is a story of unsolved mysteries, of the ghost ship, of the mysterious unidentified schooner, and why does it periodically reappear? Is there a reason? Now, as I said at the start, there are conflicting dates on when the original mysterious abandoned ship appeared. I've seen the late 1700s and I've seen the early 1800s mentioned too in different retellings. For most accounts, however, you can place them in the window of 1750 to 1850. Anywhere in that century is when most of the stories place the original event occurring. In one example from the early 1800s, which actually ties into what I was saying a minute ago, that the abandoned ship was a known missing ship. And I've also seen it suggested that the ghost ship could be an apparition of the Colbum, which sank in a storm in 1838. I've also seen it suggested that the original ship could have been a craft looted by pirates, perhaps Captain Kidd, as far back as 1701, which is the earliest date I've ever seen suggested for the original event. And what is seen today, then, is a residual haunting replaying the final moments on loop, which could also imply that the ship that was found empty and the ghost ship could be two different entities altogether. With the sheer range of dates in mind, perhaps they're unconnected and it's just a coincidence. There was also apparently a ship, and I cannot find the name of it, which just had the worst luck. Apparently being blown off course in a storm, struck by lightning, burned, and sunk with all hands. That's rough, buddy. There's also a theory that it was a schooner which left for Scotland and vanished, and now she aimlessly wanders the strait in search of home. Aside from that, I also just love a good ghost ship story, but what really intrigues me with this story is the story of the ship drifting ashore with no one on board. Again, with the sheer range of dates we're working with here that it could have happened, I could not find if that event even ever happened, but if it did, then that is the more intriguing mystery to me. Which ship was it? Is it one that is listed as missing today? Is it one that we know was abandoned at sea, like the Sea Serpent? You know, what is the story behind that ship? Why was it abandoned? That is what is more intriguing to me personally. That specific mystery. And of course, you know, we have to cover some other explanations people have suggested for the ghost ship that do not rely on the supernatural, even though I still think guardian angel ghost ship that watches over a town is way cooler. How is that not a cool answer? So like with the HMS Eurydice, some people have suggested that the ghost ship of the Northumberland Strait is merely a mirage, the easiest and most boring explanation. A specific type of mirage called the Fata Morgana has been suggested to be the cause, which is also perpetrated by some to be the origin of the Flying Dutchman ghost ship legends. Essentially, this is when warm air settles on top of cold air, and this causes light to bend when it passes through that boundary, making really weird imagery, as you can see on screen. It does cause some really weird visual effects. There's a lot of pictures online where you see what looks like ships floating in the air, and, you know, this could definitely explain a few ghost ship legends. You know, this mirage can appear to make things be flying, flipped upside down, distorted, or phasing and shimmering in and out of existence. And this kind of mirage is common in polar regions, and this strait is very far to the north. You're almost on top of the world when you're up there. So perhaps some sightings of this were indeed just a mirage, as boring as that is. Something along the lines of a will-o'-the-wisp could also serve as an explanation for the apparent sight of a burning ship in the darkness. Other ideas put forth are similar, but instead say that it's some kind of electrical phenomena. Perhaps someone saw St. Elmo's fire around a ship in the strait, and it looked like the ship was bursting into flames, which, fair enough, that would make me do a double take if I saw it. That could make a ship look weird and ghostly for sure. If you haven't looked up what St. Elmo's fire is, look it up. It does some weird things. And other ideas say that it might just be an optical illusion, a bank of fog making people see shapes when there are none, or even causing reflections of light. Yeah, I'm still going with Guardian Angel Ghost Ship, and you can't stop me. Anyway, that was the story and mystery of the ghost ship of the Northumberland Strait. A fun, cool little story that has worked its way into the culture of the town she appears in, and has become one of my favorites now after reading it. I just love the idea of Guardian Angel Ghost Ship now watching over the town that found her all those years ago. That is just cool. I think that is a really neat idea. And she has also gotten more widespread attention due to being featured in songs and even postal stamps, so her legend has spread its wings a little bit since it first started going around, and that's nice. That's nice. This is an obscure little story, and if you haven't heard of it, I hope you enjoyed hearing about it. What do you think is happening here? Is there a haunting of some kind happening? A guardian angel type scenario? Or is it just a natural phenomena, or even a bunch of lies? And what was the story behind the original ship that drifted to shore abandoned? Did it even happen? Who was she? Where did she come from? And why was she abandoned in a very similar way to the Mary Celeste? I'm an open-minded person with the paranormal, and ghost ships are some of my favorites. But I also acknowledge that eyewitness testimony alone is the least reliable form of evidence. I've said that since my first Loch Ness Monster video. So, I'm going to sit in the camp of, I think this is really cool. The folklore and mystery is very interesting, but if the ghost ship exists, I don't know. I've never been there. I've never seen it. I've not looked for it. So I don't know. Maybe there is something to this story, though. With these kinds of stories, the origins always tend to be muddy, which makes trying to solve them much harder. But perhaps some things are not meant to be solved. Tell me what you think in a comment. Let's be open-minded with everyone's opinions, because at the end of the day, we're all just here to learn and hear a cool story. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe so that both I know you did and you want to see more like this, and it also helps me grow. With all that said, have a good one, everyone.